yeah, we're gonna go drink, we're gonna go smoke, have fun. Boys. One of the guys was like, oh, can you hide the drugs in your bra? And this is a part that's hard for me to talk about. Taking a drink and blacking out. I woke up and this was happening to my body. Force took over my hand and I wrote this message to myself, open a Bible. Hello, my name is Kristelle. I am 28. I am a wife and a mother of 2 little children. And today I'm gonna talk about my testimony and just my life before Christ and how He has changed everything for the better. So when I was a young child, my family, we would kind of go to church, I would say religiously, like my grandmother would pick us up every Sunday and take us to church, but our life at home wasn't really reflective of that, if I can say. We were still, I guess I can say that our life was not really affected by going to church. So much so that by the time I was 11 and we moved to a different part of Quebec, God was no longer a part of our life. When I was 11, I started hanging out with people that were much older than me. So my friends were already like 16, 18, 20 at 11 years old. And I guess people have always told me that I had an old soul. So for me, it wasn't really weird that my friends were 10 years older than me. Because I was hanging out with people much older, I got introduced to things that children shouldn't really know. And so my friends would drink all the time and smoke weed, pop pills, and just have this party kind of lifestyle. And I was a witness to this at 11. I didn't really participate in it at first because I thought that the goodness in my heart was enough to keep me from those things. And I told myself, these are my friends, but I'm not like them. But of course, within 3 years, I was just like them. So by the age of 14, I was already drinking alcohol. I was already going to parties with older people. And of course, I started smoking weed at that age as well. It hadn't really affected my school life at the time because I actually found that school was very easy for me. And so I would be continuing my normal life at school, and then after school, I would go with these friends and I would party. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's the truth. So at 14 years old, I would be going to jams. And if any of you have ever been to a jam, then you know it's not a place for a 14-year-old. And I started going at 12. So that gives you an idea. By going to these parties, I was exposed to a lot of gang violence growing up in Uptown, which is a neighborhood in Montreal, where there's a lot of gang violence present. And I remember there was this one party that I went to. It was, ironically enough, in the basement of a church. And I remember there was somebody that was in a beef with somebody else, and they showed up to the party, and shots were fired. I remember being so young, seeing the fire from the gun, and just all these people. Basically, I got pushed into a closet and there was lots of people in front of me. So in a weird way, God was already protecting me, but it was something very traumatic for me to experience at such a young age. One day, a friend of mine from school invited me to a house party. And she told me that, oh, we're just gonna go, we're gonna smoke together, we're gonna drink, we're gonna have fun. And I remember on my way to the party, they kept asking me these really weird questions, like asking me questions about relationships that I've had with men, boys, and stuff like that. And they were talking about like their sexual experiences, but I had never, aside from the drinking and the smoking, I never even had a boyfriend, let alone hold a boy's hand, because I was scared of those things. So I found it really weird that she would ask me that because she knew me my whole life. And yet she was asking me these questions in front of the other people that were there. So I thought it was really weird, but I didn't really think about it. I was more focused on, yeah, we're gonna go drink, we're gonna go smoke, have fun. So we ended up going to this motel, and I still remember so clearly how this voice was speaking to me, telling me to go back home, but I wouldn't listen. I remember when we were at the motel, the person working at the motel had called the police because they saw a bunch of kids at a motel and they knew something was weird. And when the police came, I remember the police came directly to me, and just before that, one of the guys was like, "Oh, can you hide the drugs in your bra? They're not gonna check you. You're a young girl, you know. They're not gonna check you. So can you hide it in your clothes?" And I was like, "Okay, whatever, you know." So I did, and they were right. The police didn't check me, but what did happen was the police came to me, and they thought I was somebody else because there was a report of some young girl who ran away from home, and for some reason they thought it was me. And I was like, "No, that's not my name." And they were like, "Are you sure?" They were checking my ID. And I felt like, now looking back, that was one of those moments where that voice was telling me, like, this is not the place for you. But I didn't listen. And so after the police left and they even apologized to me, we went to a different place to continue our party. And that's when this really traumatic situation happened in my life that I believe contributed to a lot of hurt and pain that I carried with me many, many years after. So we went to this party. It was in an apartment. The apartment had no furniture, which was weird. I mean, which apartment doesn't have furniture? And there was just these drinks available and stuff like that. And I remember taking a drink and blacking out after. So that was a very difficult situation for me because when I woke up, and this is a part that's hard for me to talk about, but it's okay because it was many years ago and the Lord has healed me. But when I woke up, there was literally, in the darkness, a group of probably over 18 years old men that were, basically I went through a sexual assault while I was unconscious. I don't even know who or how many. I just know that I woke up and this was happening to my body, and my consciousness was literally trying to catch up, like, is this happening for real? Like, is this really happening? Am I dreaming right now? But I wasn't dreaming. So after that situation happened, I kind of went into this defense mechanism or this coping mechanism where I just shut it completely out of my memory. And I just moved on with my life. I just went to school. I continued getting my A's, my A pluses. I continued being on the honor roll. I never told anybody what happened, except for one person, which was my cousin. So thank you for being there for me. But I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my grandmother. I didn't tell anybody. And even the fact that I never told anybody, that friend that invited me to the party knew what happened, even though they had abandoned me. Basically, when I woke up, I was alone. So after that situation, basically my life has been a blur because I was overcome with depression, of course. I was overcome with a lot of anxiety, and I started presenting these symptoms of paranoia, these symptoms of dissociation. And I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that I have to keep moving forward. I cannot focus on this thing that happened. I don't even remember, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. That's what I told myself in that time. By the time I was 16, I would say, literally my life was, I don't even have a word to describe it, but what I can say is that I was doing more drugs than I was doing before that incident. I never drank again because I was afraid because of what had happened, but I was trying pills and definitely smoking a lot. I started a relationship with a drug dealer, this guy who was dealing cocaine at 17 years old. You know, we were still minors, but this was our life in the streets. We didn't really have anything better to look up to. You know, our role models were people that were just like us, who were coping as well, not dealing with the issues that were presented to us because of our environment and our circumstances. That relationship was really abusive. He was very mean, he was very controlling, and he was violent towards me, but I didn't know better. And of course, my brothers had no idea what was going on. Us growing up without our fathers obviously didn't help the situation. So I just chose not to tell them anything. I didn't think they would understand anyway. So by the time I was 17, I finally had the courage to leave this relationship, but I didn't leave it for something better. I just left that relationship. And that's when I started, I guess you can say, experimenting with like same-sex relationships as well as still having like these relationships that were non-committed relationships. Because at this point, I remember thinking to myself, what was the point of even keeping myself, not having any boyfriends, nothing like that, at the age of 14 for this sacred thing called virginity to be stolen from me? You know, it was not my choice to be in that position. So I was like, I'm not gonna care anymore. I'm gonna do whatever I want, since I didn't even get to choose what happened to me, you know? So now I was taking control of my life, or so I thought. I was taking control of my body. And so I was deciding who to give it to, what to do with my life. And it was not helpful. Even those relationships were toxic as well, because it was relationships that I had with people that also had toxic childhoods, who had traumatic experiences. And so we were kind of just in this cycle. I had also dropped out of school. It's something I forgot to mention. So by the time I was 15, I dropped out of school. I stopped going to high school. And because of that, the DYP was called on me, because I was a A+ student, honor roll student, never gets in trouble, never with the wrong crowd. And all of a sudden, I stopped showing up to school for 1 year. So the day I showed up, the DYP was waiting for me, and they took me from my home, put me into foster care, put me into a group home. Thankfully, I had my intelligence, so I refused to sign any paperwork, which caused them to release me after 22 days because they couldn't keep me against my will. But I was still in a prison. I remember the room was like, if I put my arms out, I can touch both walls, you know? That was supposed to be a safe place, but it didn't feel safe at all. By the time I was 17, I kind of saw that my life was not getting anywhere. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna go at least finish my high school. That's the least I can do. I got a job. I was working at McDonald's. I became a manager very quickly. So I was performing really well on the outside. Even with school, I remember the first semester I got expelled because I had drugs on me at school. But the principal let me come back the next semester. And I remember looking at my transcript that semester, and I had grades for all the years that I was missing. So even though I stopped school at 15 and I got expelled at 16, when I was 17, there was grades for those years. And that made me question. I was like, okay, what's going on? How come I have grades? I was not in school. Like, I know I was not in class. So how come I have grades in these years, in grade 9 and grade 8 and 9? So I started realizing that something like supernatural was happening, but I couldn't really put words to it in the moment. I just told myself, well, that's less school for me to get my diploma, so I'm just gonna not say anything and just keep moving forward. I remember one day coming home from school, I was so high because I couldn't function without being high. I was so high. I was in the bus. I had this notebook, this little red notebook, and I was trying to journal, but I couldn't even control my hands because I was too high. So my hands were shaking, but I was like, oh, I need to journal. I'm gonna draw. I was drawing this picture, and then it's like this force took over my hand. And I wish I had the book so I could show you. But this force took over my hand, and I wrote this message to myself. And the message basically said, open a Bible, which was weird because it honestly came out of nowhere. So I was like, open a Bible. Me thinking to myself, oh, I'm gonna go on a spiritual journey. I'm gonna get a Quran too. I'm gonna look into Buddhism. I'm gonna do this whole path, you know? But the message was open a Bible. But me and my humanity, I was like, I'm gonna open all of the Bibles. That was my understanding. And basically what happened was I opened the Bible. I started reading it. It was this Bible that I got from a random hotel, a Gideon Bible. I remember one night I was telling myself, I'm not addicted to drugs. I was like, I know I can stop. I'm not addicted. I'm gonna stop today. And so that evening, instead of throwing it out in the garbage, I remember I was like, I'm gonna just take everything so that I don't waste it, and I'm gonna stop. Tomorrow, I'm not gonna do it anymore. And so I did that. I took everything, and I threw away all the tools that I had after. And in the morning, I woke up at like 6 a.m. I took a shower, I got ready, I was looking for clothes. I don't know what I was looking for. Nothing was really fitting, but I put on the longest skirt that I had, which was still above my knees. And I woke up my mom and I was like, Mom, wake up, we're going to church. And I remember my mom literally jumping out of her sleep and she's like, what? You're gonna come to church with me? And I was like, yes. And so we went to the church. It was just this random church that we didn't even go to. Like, my mom wasn't really going to church either, but she was happy to go with me. And I went into this church, and I remember feeling this pressure in my chest, feeling these tears behind my eyes. And I didn't understand what was happening because I didn't really know anything about God. I didn't really know anything about Jesus. It was just a few days that I received this message to open a Bible. So I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew that my body was having this emotional response just from me walking into the church. And I was trying to hold back the tears. It was so hard. I remember, like, I was talking to myself the whole time. I was saying, Chrissy, why are you crying? There's nothing wrong. You're happy. There's nothing wrong. I'm not sad. Why am I gonna cry? I remember having this argument with myself. It's so silly when I think about it, arguing with myself. But in that moment, the pastor noticed me, and he knew my name because he knew my mother. And he was like, Kristelle. And the second he called my name, my guard, it was broken. I looked up to this man, and all the pain, all the suffering, it came out. I started crying so much I could not control the outpouring of the pain that I was feeling. But even though I was feeling all that pain, I was also feeling all this love, all this forgiveness, and this God that I didn't know anything about, but who seemed to know everything about me, who welcomed me in with no judgment. And so from that day, literally, all of my friends disappeared. I don't know what happened to them. They stopped texting me. They disappeared from my Facebook at the time. And we just lost contact immediately. And that's when I started looking for a church. I started going to that church, and eventually I ended up in the church that I'm currently in a few years later. But I'm very grateful for that moment that I had at that first church, because they were welcoming. They didn't ask me any questions. They didn't ask me to share my story. They just called my name and offered me prayers and welcomed me. And that was a love that I guess I was really missing in my life. A love that sees you where you are, doesn't ask anything of you, just gives you love, gives you care, and accepts you. And so that was the day that I met the Lord Jesus Christ. Yes. I have learned to love myself. I have learned to accept my past, that it is what it is. And also, I see, like it says in the Bible, that sometimes we go through things so that we can comfort others in the way that we ourselves have been comforted by our loving Father, our God, who is our comforter. And so now I work as an intervention worker in a shelter. I share music that is healing and uplifting to the soul. And I want to encourage anybody who has gone through a past of gender-based violence, rape, abuse of different kinds, and just rejection in general from family and friends. I want to encourage you that there is hope for you. There is no hole that is so deep that God cannot reach his hand and pull us out, save us from ourselves, save us from this corrupt world, and just give us a hope and a future. And that's what Jesus has done for me, and I know that he can do it for you. So I encourage you, whatever situation you find yourself in now, just call on the name of the Lord, because whoever calls on him will be saved. And it might not be something that happens overnight. For me, it's been 10 years. And yet I can say that it's really now that I'm really experiencing real freedom, real healing, real love. And so don't expect something to happen in the snap of a fingers, but I can guarantee you that if you reach out to God, if you say with a sincere heart, God, whoever you are, if you are real, show yourself to me, he will do it. And you will see that bit by bit, step by step, he will change your life for the better.